What is going on, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Criterion Corner. This is a segment on my channel where I pick a film in the Criterion collection or that's streaming on the Criterion channel streaming service and talk about it in detail. And the film today that I'm going to be discussing is not in the Criterion collection, but it's currently streaming on the Criterion channel. This was a part of an upload they did of a ton of horror films for the month of October. They're prepping us for Halloween, and this was a film I'd never even heard of before. And I read the plot description and I saw some of the reviews for it, and I felt like, wow, this might be an underrated gem that not a lot of people have heard about. And I was really excited to check it out. And the film I'm going to be discussing today is Massacre at Central High. Massacre at Central High is directed by Rene Daalder. Maimed by bullies at a California high school, a new student engineers acts of revenge. So, I didn't know anything about this movie prior to going into watching it, other than I saw the poster. It looks like your typical late 70s, early 80s slasher movie with the way that the poster was designed. And so I jumped into this with high expectations, and I enjoyed this movie quite a bit. I think there's some problems with it, but also it's an incredibly interesting watch because it's not what you expect whatsoever. The poster gives you an idea that this is going to be a very cliche, typical slasher movie, and there's a lot more going on underneath the surface, which is what I really appreciate about it. So at the beginning of the film, we're introduced to David, who is a young kid that's moving to a new high school, and he gets to the new school, and when he gets there, he's going around the school trying to figure out how to navigate his way through the school. And he's confronted by these kids that are the bullies of the school. They're picking on all of these different people, treating them really poorly, and he's just upset by it. He doesn't understand why these bullies are doing this, why they're being so awful. And then you're introduced to his friend, Mark, who invites him there, who also came from this other school, and is like, you're gonna love it here, it's so much different. But you find out that he is also friends and really close to this bully group, and he tries to get David to essentially join them to kind of establish this hierarchical structure at the school of like, they're better than everyone else. And the bully group starts really harassing David to where they end up hurting him very badly. He's working on a car. They end up dropping the car on his leg and giving him this limp and really hurting him really badly. And the film is David enacting his revenge on these bullies and what happens when he takes his revenge out on these people. So it's a really interesting film because I would not call this a slasher movie whatsoever. It doesn't have any of the stereotypical slasher tropes. This is obviously a couple years before John Carpenter's Halloween, which is when the slasher genre really began to take off. And there obviously is that setup of him committing the kills, but the difference is you're seeing him do it. We see him set them up, we see him commit them. There's no mystery or aura of suspense surrounding it. Halloween obviously has much more of like the POV style at the beginning of the film. There's this stalkerish element where in this film it's much more of just like scene thing happens, goes to the next scene. But what this movie is more than anything is it's an overt social commentary. And what's really interesting about it is there are no adults in the entire film until the third act when these police officers become a part of the film. Up until that point, there's no teachers. You don't see anyone in the school that's an adult. It's all kids. Literally the entire movie is just the kids that go to this school, which most of the kids that go to this school look like they're in their 20s, but that's something entirely different. But what's interesting is the way that the film is sectioned out, because at the beginning when David first arrives to the school, so much of the film is showing the empathy that he has towards these kids who are being picked on and bullied by these other people who think they're better than them. And so much of it can be just as simple as looking at the hierarchical structure of a school and how a school operates and how people form these cliques and how the athletes and sometimes the more physically strong people feel like they're better than everyone else, and so they pick on everyone just because they can, really. So the film shows that pretty simplistically, but I also think that there's a larger commentary on just how our society operates, because at the beginning it's very much that simplistic structure of you see David's character as like, oh, he's gonna be this hero who saves all the kids that are being punished and being treated poorly for no reason. But what's interesting about it is the shift in the film. And when he starts enacting revenge on these bullies, when there's no rule from the bullies anymore, when those people aren't in the school, picking on other people, how the people who used to be picked on try to take on those roles and do what those bullies were doing, and how they kind of fill the shoes of the people who are no longer there. And I thought that was so fascinating, of this idea of this structure that has existed for so long, this power dynamic, whether that be in something as simple as school or government or anything, because even government organizations that are overthrown, a lot of times they're overthrown and replaced by something worse than what already existed. And this whole idea of, can we make it a better place if we get rid of these people who are causing all this harm? Will it eradicate the harm, or will new harm just present itself? And I thought that whole cyclical idea of just things repeating themselves and people not learning from history was really interesting, especially for this type of a film that guises itself as like a slasher movie. It was really interesting to see that. This does have some typical pitfalls of the slasher genre. There's like gratuitous scenes of nudity in it for absolutely no reason. That's actually quite hilarious. Some of the performances in this are not great. They really took me out of it. For such a short runtime, I think this thing's like an hour and 35 minutes. It starts to get a little repetitive towards the middle, where you're just like, okay, speed this up. I know where it's going. But the interesting part about it is that commentary that the film is delivering. And I think it's really interesting that a movie in this time period used that formula that we would come to know throughout the 1980s, that was just the same recycled thing over and over with a new killer and a new cast of characters, but trying to utilize that formula to create something much more thoughtful and interesting is something that I really respected. I just wish personally that there was something more there. I felt like there was something lacking throughout the film that prevented me from loving it. I liked it, and I thought it was really interesting to pick apart. And I think as far as this genre is concerned, it's a really interesting movie to watch if you've never seen it, because of what it's saying and how it's saying it. So I definitely think it is worth watching in that regard, but I don't think it's a perfect film. I think there's a lot of things that could have been tidied up. I think there's a lot of things that could have been fixed to streamline it or make it a little bit more interesting and immersive, especially the soundtrack choice, which just feels like a soap opera. I'm not 100% sure why they chose the song that they chose. When they first cue it in at the beginning of the movie, it almost has a laughable quality to it that I appreciated, but at the same time, it kind of takes you out of the whole aesthetic of the movie and the entire atmosphere that the movie is trying to convey. But either way, I think this is still worth checking out. If you're a fan of the horror genre and want to see something that really subverts your expectations as to what the genre is capable of, I would definitely check out this film. So have you seen Massacre at Central High? Did you love it? Did you hate it? Leave me a comment down below and let me know what you thought. I thought this movie was really entertaining, and I thought it was really thought-provoking. Despite all the problems that I had with it, I still think it's worth checking out. As always, if you can like the video and subscribe to the channel, it helps me out a lot and lets me know the type of content you're looking for. I'm always putting out new material and look forward to getting more out for you in the near future. And as always, everyone, thank you so much for watching, and have a great rest of your day.